I have found through my studies in science, through my experience in religion and spirituality, and through my own development, a different model of the human personality than Sigmund Freud. There is a master-slave faculty theory that I call it. It's very simple, it's not complicated. At the center of our self is the soul, which is the experiencer of four different faculties, four areas of the brain that serve the soul, that are meant to serve the soul, but there are problems in this servitude because they often end up serving themselves. There's a lot of different kinds of human personalities. This is what Freud didn't understand. There are people who are very intellectual, academic, scientists, mathematicians, like Spock in Star Trek, or Einstein would be a very intellectual person, somebody who thinks all the time. Logic and reason rules the soul. What is the effect of an intellectual personality? Is that the emotions are not rich. The emotions become the subconscious in that person. The emotions become the unconscious, the animal as well, and the physical as well. They're different souls. We're not all human-hearted people. There are intellectuals, there are people who are emotional, like say a Meryl Streep, an actress, or a musician, or like Charles Aznavour, very emotional person. The emotions are the main faculty, which means the emotions grow a lot more than the other faculties. And that creates a problem in the soul because there's an imbalance in the personality. There's such a thing as an intellectual arrogance that could be a personal problem that has effects. An intellectual arrogance will have weak emotions, closed emotions, fearful, infantile emotions that have never grown. The passions, the pleasures, the business, and the profit consciousness is weak in an intellectual. This is stupid to business, usually. If you're busy with one side of the psyche, the other side of the psyche is going to start dying, or it's going to start being malnourished and unhappy. Right? So we have four different faculties. Usually one of these faculties is the master faculty, and the other three are the slave faculties. There are people who are physical people. Wrestlers, boxers, manual laborers, whose wealth is the physique. They live and die with the physique. Their emotional, animal, and intellectual development is very, very small. So there's a kind of division that takes place, a slavery that takes place in the other faculties to serve the well-being of the physical part, because that's the main activity of the soul. Freud didn't understand the differences in human personalities and the kind of problems and conflicts that can exist within the soul itself. Sometimes the intellectual and the emotional battle, the reason and the emotions battle. Sometimes the emotions and the animal are battling. The animal wants pleasure, the emotions want more emotional growth, so there's a battle there. There's a conflict within the soul itself. The soul is either a beneficiary of its evolution of faculty, or it is a victim of that. Insanity is when there's a victimization, when one of these four faculties becomes sufficiently unhappy, sufficiently malnourished, and not given any respects, it becomes a rebel in the soul itself. It becomes a rebel to the master faculty. Basically, the slave rebels against the master within the same soul. This is a different theory of the personality. It's a theory that works. It works for me. It works for the friends that I've made. The conflict between faculties create internal wars and internal depressions. And there's many different kinds of things that can happen depending on who is it that is the master of the personality. Is it the intellectual? Is it the emotional? Are we dealing with an animal type person, a business person, a pleasure profit kind of person who doesn't like emotions that much? There are such people. Freud would have a problem, for example, with a lot of the black people who are not, emotional phenoms. There are always exceptions. I mean, there's Oprah Winfrey, there's a lot of people who developed emotion. Denzel Washington, beautiful emotions. But there's a lot of black people who don't like to be emotional because they think emotions make them weak. So they exist in the animal self and in the physical self, which they make very powerful and very sophisticated, which is an asset to the soul. It's not a negative, but their subconscious is emotional and intellectual. A lot of people can't read or write. There's an intellectual vacuum in that person that can kill the soul. Any of the four faculties that becomes sufficiently battered will be basically the reason why the soul sinks. The soul has to manage four faculties, and usually it doesn't manage four faculties. One of the faculties becomes the master, and the three others become the slave. That is the master-slave theory faculty of the psyche.